Hello, this is Mario from ODEON. In this video, we will show you the new features in ODEON 19. An improved 3D render will now show by default in the material list. It can either show layer colors or material colors. When showing material colors, if you change materials on surfaces, you will be able to see the updated material directly on the model. In the inner view, you can shift-click on surfaces to reveal the surface number. In the outer view, when you shift-click on the model, ODEON will show you all the surfaces that the click goes through. You can always toggle back to the wireframe 3D view. Now, you can change layer colors from within the standalone 3D render. These modified layer colors will be reflected in the material list. You can use this to set colors that more closely resemble the colors of the real room. You can even set visual transparency, for example, to make windows and glass look more realistic. Also, the 3D render just looks more vibrant compared to ODEON 18. In the standalone 3D render, you can now insert assets, which are 2D and 3D objects that you can place in the room for visual purposes. They can also be assigned to sources. ODEON will come with a selection of pre-installed images you can use, and you can also import your own. With movie auralisation, you will be able to listen to the acoustics in the model while moving through the room.
The Athenian agora is not slow. It was during the 5th century before Christ that the Athenian agora began to take shape as a commercial and civic center of Athens. Before the middle of that century, the center of public...
First, you define a fixed receiver path. ODEON then computes the auralisation following that path, and exports the experience into an MP4 video file that can be shared to anyone. Due to the MP4 compression, a 1-minute video is small enough in size to share even by email. ODEON can now accept absorption coefficients and carry out calculations in 1/3 octave bands. The final results will still be in full octave bands. However, calculating internally in 3rd octave bands allows to find behaviors that happen in frequency bands narrower than full octave bands. If you use materials with coefficients only available in full octave bands, ODEON will internally interpolate for 3rd octave bands. You can always keep calculations in full octave bands if you prefer. However, when calculating for 1/3 octave bands, the calculation time doesn't extend much. Rather than triple, it only increases about 20%. As highly requested by users, you can now enter your own frequency-dependent scattering coefficients. The red curve on the bar graph is the scattering curve. This checkbox is to choose whether to use your own coefficients or to use our original definition of scattering, where you enter a single coefficient at middle frequencies, and ODEON extrapolates for the whole frequency range. You can now toggle a window showing more information about the selected material. You will be able to see the absorption coefficients in full octave bands, as well as absorption and scattering coefficients in 3rd octave bands if you provided them. If the manufacturer has provided the data, you may also see the company logo, picture of the material, and buttons for documents such as the measurement report. And additional material properties will now be displayed clearly in a separate table. We have expanded the template for importing materials from a spreadsheet, which allows you to import the new data we have mentioned, such as scattering coefficients and picture of the material. When you copy the data into ODEON, you will already be able to see the data in a table format. Another user request we have implemented is the ability to automatically generate jobs, such as jobs with the selected receiver for each individual source, or single-point jobs with the selected sources for each individual receiver. We have added a search bar in the top icon bar. This allows you to search for topics in the same help file that is used for the context-sensitive help. When you modify a CAD model from a software different from SketchUp and you re-import it into ODEON, this can change the numbering of the surfaces, which in turn can mix up which materials are assigned to surfaces. However, if your CAD model has layers in it and you previously assigned materials based on layers, ODEON can reassign materials to layers based on your previous configuration. We have greatly simplified the procedure for calibrating measurements for strength G and STI. Rather than going through various pop-up windows to create the calibration file, the full procedure is now done in a single window, where you can add measurement files for one-step or two-step calibration in any order. ODEON 19 includes a new building acoustics module, which allows you to calculate the insulation of a partition wall by loading measurements of the two rooms. Also notice that the module can derive reverberation times in 1/3 octave bands from your measurements, which you can export. ODEON can now perform open-loop measurements, meaning ODEON can generate wave files of the sine sweeps. You can play them on an external device, and then you can load the recordings into ODEON to be processed into impulse responses. This eliminates the requirement to play the sweep from ODEON and record it at the same time. You can now edit the position and orientation of sources and receivers from the 3D render you open in the Edit window. The source group editor can now also edit groups of receivers. The Compare and Average tool now has a Simulated versus Measured and Targets tab, just like in the multipoint response. In previous versions, when you loaded an ambisonic impulse response, you could change the listening direction and play again. However, now you can change the listening direction while the auralisation is playing. The B format to binaural decoder is also improved, providing a much better out-of-head experience. Another improvement is the ability to see the decay roses for ambisonic measurements. ODEON 19 will now include an alternative EDT parameter. Currently, the standard way to calculate the parameter is with a linear regression. However, the intention of the original inventor of the parameter was to calculate it without a regression. So, the calculation of EDT without a regression will soon be updated in ISO 3382 Part 1. This updated way to calculate EDT will already be in ODEON ready for use. Of course, you will still have access to the currently standard EDT. The Waterhouse effect is now included in calculations. This is the increase of sound pressure in positions close to walls. Even though receiver positions should be at a certain distance from walls according to the standards, there may be some occasions where this effect is relevant. We look forward to you trying ODEON 19.